Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
There was big news over the weekend regarding the war machine, and I'll get into that. But on Friday, I was talking about the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's state convention that was happening on Saturday. Well, that happened. I live blogged the event. I will post the link in the show notes. You can read what it is that I said about the goings-on as they were happening. And there was, of course, the presidential straw poll that happened at the convention, and one of the delegates from the New Hampshire convention was pledged to the winner of that straw poll. And unfortunately, yours truly, Darryl W. Perry, was not the winner of that straw poll. The winner of the straw poll was Gary Johnson. None of the above finished second, 1 vote behind. I finished in third, 2 votes behind, none of the above. And then Mark Allen Feldman received, I believe, 2 votes, and Derek Michael Reed, who was the third presidential candidate to show up to the event. Myself, Mark Allen Feldman, and Derek Michael Reed were the 3 presidential candidates that attended and addressed the convention. Derek Michael Reed received 1 vote in that presidential straw poll. Again, Mark Allen Feldman received 2. I received 4. None of the above got 6, and Gary Johnson received 7 votes. And we used approval voting for the straw poll, meaning that people could wind up voting for as many or as few as they liked. And there's actually a piece of legislation before the New Hampshire Election Law Committee that will be heard tomorrow about approval voting. I will go to that. I will likely wind up taking my voice recorder and recording my testimony of that, and depending on how the quality sounds, I might wind up playing part of that in an upcoming episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Again, maybe not. Depends on the quality of the audio. But I mentioned that about the legislative thing because it is legislative season here in New Hampshire. And, well, most Tuesdays from last week going forward through probably mid to late March, possibly early April, I will be spending a good bit of time at the New Hampshire State House, specifically in the Legislative Office Building, which is where the legislative hearings generally happen. Every now and then there's a hearing that is so big that they wind up having to put it in what they call Reps Hall, which is the 400-seat chamber that the state reps use when they do their legislative sessions and they vote on stuff. Basically, that's the giant sausage factory. And I say the sausage factory not because, there's, a lot more men than women. No, that's not what I mean. That would be sausage fest. And I'm sure you've probably heard the term sausage fest before. It's to describe a gathering with a disproportionate number of men. But no, the sausage factory, and I forget who said it, but they said that if one likes sausage and laws, they should never watch either be made. And that's why I refer to the legislative area as the sausage factory, because it's where the dirty work of making laws happens. And, yeah, if you have disdain for the law at all, then definitely just attend one time, and it will convince you that your disdain is appropriate. If you have respect for, we're a nation of laws and we have to respect the laws, then go to, the sausage factory and listen to the testimonies And you will quickly see that, no, these laws are not, there for the good of everybody. It's there because somebody is scared. And I say that because not, necessarily, oh, I'm afraid for my life, I have to blah, blah, blah. But most of the laws are made because somebody's scared of something. That they might be scared on behalf of someone else. That they might be scared for themselves, but it's generally that there's some kind of fear of, well, if we don't do this, then what could happen? Freedom is scary. And yeah, kind of freedom can be scary at times. And that brings me back to what I had mentioned about the big news over the weekend regarding the war machine. And this has happened fairly rapidly over the last few days to where it was, I think, the middle of last week when the Iranian government announced that they had removed the core from the Arak heavy water reactor and filled it with concrete. A day later, it was reported that, no, we made that announcement too early. It's not actually filled, but it should be on Friday. And then that happened, and then the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed on Saturday that Iran was in full compliance with the commitments under the P5+1 nuclear deal. There's an official name for it that I don't have in front of me, but it's the I think it's the Joint something JCPOA is the acronym. Which is the official name for the P5+1 nuclear deal. But back to the article here from antiwar.com. The IAEA chief, Amano Yukiya, praised all involved for making the pact happen. The IAEA statement then obliged the international community to lift all nuclear-related sanctions against Iran, something they wasted no time doing. Even the United States government, which was believed to be the last to abide by the treaty, has seen an order by the State Department to immediately lift all nuclear-related sanctions. Key word here, nuclear-related sanctions. And I mention that because, well, there's still other sanctions in place against Iran. The United States government still classifies Iran as a state sponsor of terror. And there are still, some level of sanctions against Iran. The article here continues. It says that meaning the lifting of all nuclear-related sanctions, this means that tens of billions, and by some estimates, over $100 billion, that's $100 billion US dollars, in frozen Iranian assets will be freed up, and Iran will be able to sell oil internationally like any other country. The freed up assets are expected to set the stage for massive Iranian spending on modernization of their economy. The last measure Iran needed to complete for compliance, the removal of the core from the Arak heavy water reactor, was completed on Friday. The reactor, meant to produce medical isotopes, is to be redesigned by one of the P5+1 members, likely China. And there's more on this when we continue on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
And I'll jump back into this article here in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about a way that you can keep your money in the free market, assuming that you use free market money and promote Bitcoin as an alternative in a fiat-centric world. You need Spend-A-Bit. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy, you guessed it, with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products, millions of them, from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants, including Overstock.com and, of course, free press publications. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin-accepting merchant, like I am, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. Spendabit.fppradio.com. That's spendabit, all one word, .fppradio.com. Back now to the news from antiwar.com. Actually, the first of three news stories from antiwar.com about the developments over the weekend in regards to Iran and the lifting of nuclear-related sanctions. Again, not the lifting of all sanctions. And some people, quite frankly, want to, just throw more sanctions on Iran, and I'll get into that. But I, for one, am happy to see that sanctions are being lifted, because sanctions are an act of war. When you prevent someone, or in this case, millions of someone's, by designation of, well, do you happen to live in a geographic area where the government has done a thing that we don't like, so therefore you are prohibited from fill in the blank. That is an act of aggression. That is an act of war. But most people don't see it that way. They see it as, well, we have to make sure that something, keep things safe, blah, 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 something, America. But no, the sanctions are an act of war. If another country placed sanctions on the people of the United States, I don't know of any man, woman, or child living in the United States who would say, oh, that's fine. That's fine. That's not an act of aggression. I don't need to buy vodka. If let's just suppose that some European country put a ban on certain things being imported into the United States. Vodka would be one of those things. Now, yes, there probably are some American vodka companies, but there are also a lot of foreign vodka companies. So, people would wind up not being able to get a certain type of alcohol that they want. There's probably a lot of tequilas that would not be able to wind up being imported. There's probably a lot of beers that you like that you would no longer be able to drink if there were similar sanctions on the United States as what the United States has placed on other countries. And I realize that there's a lot of people that, they just like their Bud Light and their Coors, and they're like, I don't need none of those foreign beers. And they would probably be okay with, some country putting sanctions on the U.S. But for people that are, quite frankly, a little more sophisticated and enjoy things that are produced from other countries, then, yes, I think those people would realize, hey, wait a second, they're preventing me from my freedom. So, therefore, that's an act of aggression. But they don't see it the other way. They only see, well, it's an act of aggression when it's done against me. But they don't see it as an act of aggression when it's done against someone else. The article here from Anti-War continues. The hopes that the implementation would boost international diplomacy with Iran were bolstered by a side deal between Iran and the U.S. to exchange prisoners. 5 U.S. detainees were freed in return for 7 Iranians, and at least 4 of the 5 U.S. detainees that were freed by the Iranian government were dual citizen U.S. Iranian citizens. One of those being a Washington Post reporter, Jason Rezaian, who I believe I have reported on previously on this show. The article here, the first of 3 articles from antiwar.com, concludes, Iran's reformist Rouhani government ran for election heavily on a pledge to make a deal to end the nuclear sanctions and was eager to get the relief in place before next month's elections, allowing them to campaign on the success. Though it had initially been speculated that Saturday's confirmation would take until spring, that ultimately was not the case. Now, the second article that I have, also from antiwar.com, came out early Sunday. And, well, the Obama administration reportedly wasted little time to wind up implementing new sanctions against Iran. The story, again, from antiwar.com, says the Obama administration decided to withhold sanctions against Iran over ballistic missile testing on fears that it would damage their ability to negotiate a prisoner exchange. After the exchange happened, the U.S. went ahead with the sanctions anyhow. The move is likely to fuel new acrimony with Iran, and indeed with other P5+1 member nations, coming less than 24 hours after the U.S. had removed the nuclear-related sanctions against Iran. Iranian officials have argued the new sanctions would violate the letter and spirit of the nuclear deal. So here you have an agreement that says, we, the Iranian government, will do X, Y, and Z. In response, you, the members of the P5+1, or, Iran was the +1 here. So you, the members of the P5, you will do A, B, and C. And one of those things was lifting nuclear-related sanctions. And I'm not sure, because I've not read the entirety of the deal. I don't know if the agreement said that they would lift sanctions or if it said they will lift sanctions related to, fill in the blank. But in either case, it does seem a little disingenuous for the U.S. government to say, yes, we're agreeing with the deal and we're lifting these sanctions, but here's some other ones that are totally not related to this. And yes, I realize that, we're putting them in place after you did X, Y, and Z, but no, these are totally unrelated. But it's still sanctions, and I agree that it violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the agreement. The article continues. It says, indeed, that may be the case, that being violating the letter and spirit of the agreement. That may be the case. These sanctions are based on UN Security Council resolutions forbidding Iran from developing ballistic missiles capable of delivering a nuclear warhead, which suggests the resolution to be part of the now resolved issue of Iran's nuclear program. Iran has also argued that the missiles in question aren't capable of delivering a nuclear warhead at any rate, meaning they aren't covered by the resolution. So it's interesting, to say the least, but there's more, all from antiwar.com. And, of course, I'll post these links in the show notes. You can read them at your leisure. Stay tuned.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, we aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience. Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. The liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So, jumping back now into the article, continuing the article from antiwar.com about these new sanctions that the U.S. government placed on the Iranian government. Literally hours, less than 24 of them, after the nuclear-related sanctions were lifted. The article continues. It says the other P5+1 nations all seem to agree, that is, agree that the ballistic missiles that are not capable of delivering a nuclear warhead are not covered by the UN Security Resolution forbidding Iran from having ballistic missiles capable of delivering a nuclear warhead. That the other P5+1 nations seem to agree, and it was only the U.S. that complained at all about the test, let alone going so far as to impose new sanctions against Iran within a day of lifting the other sanctions against them. The new sanctions aren't as broad as the original, of course, but will still serve as a slap in the face of, or rather serve as a slap in the face after Iran made the P5+1 deal and then went the extra mile to implement every portion of it months ahead of schedule. That's likely to be a costly decision for the U.S., as Iran is planning to use much of its newly unfrozen wealth to modernize its economy, and some major international corporations could be in for some big contracts in that regard. New U.S. sanctions are likely to push the U.S. companies to the back of the line in competing for such deals. Now, one of the things that these sanctions do, or rather the lack of nuclear-related sanctions, is it no longer allows the United States government to wind up punishing any business regardless of where they're located. It no longer allows the U.S. to punish them in such a way if they do business with a person or entity located in Iran. Now, of course, if it's a U.S.-based company, then the U.S. government can still somehow get in and say, no, you can't do this because we're Uncle Sam and we say so. But regarding businesses not headquartered in the U.S., the U.S. can't really do anything now, which is good because the U.S. government should not be involving itself in every interaction. They should not be serving as, officiant, if you will, of looking over everything. If you watch football, then you will know that they've got what they call the booth reviewers, to where there are certain plays that the booth reviewer looks at again just to make sure that the officials on the field got it right. So the United States government should not be serving as booth reviewers of everything that happens. Of, oh, wait a second, no, you are not allowed to do business with them, not because the two of you can't come to a mutually agreed upon business dealing, but because we say that you can't do business with them for reasons. And we're the booth reviewer, so therefore what we say stands. And that's what happens in football is if the booth reviewer says, you got that wrong, then the officials down on the field say, okay, we got that wrong. So what the booth reviewer says stands. Doesn't, matter, does not matter at all how ridiculous it is. It could be, the most obvious thing of, yes, that was a catch and a touchdown. If booth reviewer says, no, it wasn't, okay, well, the call on the field gets overturned. And that's basically how the United States government is acting. They're acting as booth reviewer over everything that happens anywhere in the world, and what they say stands. And it's absolutely ridiculous and should not at all be what the U.S. government is doing, partly because it's none of our damn business what people are doing in other countries that is completely consensual. And even if it was, it's still being funded through theft and fraud and coercion. So, yeah, knock it the F off. Now, let me jump into this third article from antiwar.com. Apparently, there are not very many people in the presidential race that are happy about the lifting of nuclear-related sanctions. Point of fact, I believe I'm the only presidential candidate to mention anything positive about the lifting of sanctions. And this next article from antiwar.com mentions several of them, specifically Hillary Clinton, who is not happy about the lifting of sanctions and what she says she will do if she's elected president. The article, again from antiwar.com, reads, on Saturday, the United States government ordered its nuclear-related sanctions against Iran lifted, only to follow up on Sunday with some new, albeit much more limited, sanctions against Iran, nominally over some ballistic missile tests. The Obama administration is trying to play up the growing rapprochement with Iran, with hopes that the nuclear deal will lead to the resolution of more regional disputes. This being the administration's last year in office, however, the future may not be so bright for U.S.-Iran relations. All the major Republican candidates were railing against the nuclear deal and the easing of sanctions, with several promising to tear up the nuclear pact if elected. They are likewise agitating for significant new sanctions against Iran. They're not the only ones. Democratic front-runner Hillary Clinton, though trying to be a bit more upbeat about the nuclear deal as such, was similarly pushing for major new sanctions, declaring Iran a threat to regional security that needs to be met with quote-unquote firm resolve. And while the Republican candidates spent much of their Thursday debate trying to present Clinton as a continuation of Obama-style diplomacy, Clinton appeared to more closely echo them in most regards, declaring Iran's capture of U.S. Navy sailors earlier in the week offensive and demeaning, far afield from the administration's happiness at the quick and easy resolve of the incident. The incident here mentioned about the U.S. sailors that were captured, and I'm using air quotes around that term, captured by Iran. Well, they went into Iranian territory. They were in a boat in the Persian Gulf and went into Iranian waters. And, well, if an Iranian ship came into U.S. waters, that ship would be intercepted, and those sailors would wind up being taken hostage by the U.S. government. The U.S. government would probably throw them in Guantanamo and not give them any rights, not give them any chance at any kind of hearing, and would then wind up feeding them with a tube either in their nasal or in their anus, or possibly just straight through in the stomach. But the Iranian government quickly realized, all right, it was an accident. You didn't mean to come into our waters. All right, have a good day. Please don't do it again. but not everybody's happy about that. Hey, don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over, AMA at FPPradio.com.